Welcome to Life in Real Estate. I'm here today with Kristen Wolfram, and Kristen is a family law attorney in Michigan. And last few episodes, if you haven't seen, take a look at, because this is following up on a couple of those. We're going to get into detail about singles who want to purchase a home together. We talked a little bit about that in a previous podcast, so take a look at that. But now we're going to get into a little bit specific, more detail of what you really should think about, because from my experience, I don't know about yours, Kristen, not too many people think about this long term. And what does it mean if you're single, you're purchasing a home together? How do you protect yourselves, each person individually and then together?
Okay. So this is the scenario where no one is, at least at this point, contemplating marriage, right?
Right.
So
right.
We're just two individuals. We want to live together, cohabitate, if you will. The best way to do it is a contract. It's not a prenuptial agreement because we're not in anticipation of marriage,
Right.
but it can still be a contract. So we talked in other episodes, it would still be possible if one person wants to be, or referencing the other one, if one person wants to be the homeowner and the other person is has a lease and there's a landlord-tenant type relationship, can help protect it. But if both people want to be owners together, the best way to determine that is to have a contract ahead of time. There is nothing preventing you from jointly purchasing the home, nothing preventing you from jointly applying for it and being financed from a bank. But also, there's no set procedure for then. There's no set procedure for if one person no longer wants to be the owner of the home and the other person does, or something like that.
So if you decide up front, say you want to purchase together, okay, so you're both on the mortgage, you're going to finance it together, so you're both putting money towards the purchase of that payment and the mortgage payments, and you're both on the deed.
Sure.
You want to protect that money just in case something happens down the road. You don't want to be at the end of the road and have no protection in place for whatever you contributed, right?
Yeah, and I think what you contributed is probably a good place to start. If everyone is going to split everything 50-50, we're going to equally submit everything, our mortgage payment directly down half, our down payment directly down the middle, utilities directly down the middle, tax payments, things like that directly down the middle. That could be, somewhat easy, or I should say easier, although we'll talk about some hurdles to, getting out of that situation. But, if you're going to be absolutely equal partners, that could simplify things. But that's probably rarely the case.
I was just going to say, because there are different things that happen throughout your time together in that home where one may have to contribute more at some point in time. Maybe somebody loses a job. And so a contract, flexible enough and yet still applicable to making sure you're covered for whatever you have contributed, seems to make most sense.
Yeah, that's right. I think, and that can be adjusted again based on those change, or maybe that contemplates some kind of change of circumstance in the future, right? So like you said, if someone loses a job, so maybe our intention is to split things 50-50, but then we have, someone has an illness, or if someone needs to, is changing careers or something along those lines. So you'd want to make those things, because then, right, when there is a time that we need to separate it, there's no mechanism. So in order to make someone sell a house, like, okay, now I've got, $20,000, $30,000 worth of equity in this home.
Right.
The relationship isn't working out and I want to move. To get them to pay you out, they can't necessarily just agree to do that. And there's,
legally, there's, when you say mechanism, just to back up a second, you mean there's, without a contract in place prior, and you get to that point, that means there's no legal mechanism to split those assets or to recover anything from either side, right?
It has to go to court.
Okay.
Right. If you and it'd be easier to go to court on what I would call a contract action, to say enforcement of this contract,
right,
than it would be to go to court on what is going to be a partition action, which is just way more complicated, right? When you
Right.
own jointly own property and you want somebody to no longer jointly own it with you.
Right. And there's no mechanism in place for
Right.
that. So you had nothing up front. So
Mhm.
that's why think about a contract ahead of time,
Mhm.
just to help you each protect whatever you have added into those or that asset. Whether you helped with the down payment, you're helping with mortgage payments,
Mhm.
you helped put a new furnace in, whatever the case may be. It just makes sense to have a contract before you move in.
Yeah,
And
something that would be built in, sort of, or at least, I should say, again, when I talked about the prenuptials, there's prenuptial agreements and then there's the law, but either way, one of them is sort of a default
Yeah.
if it shakes out. There's even less in this instance, with two people owning a house, so the contributions and things like that, it's not like you can go through the general family law process and have an equitable division. You'll need to sue for sort of individual torts in that. So unjust enrichment, for example, because you benefited from something without paying for it. If I'm the one that put in the hot water heater and the furnace or that kind of thing,
right.
And so they're like, let me call it a package deal if it was a family law case, but not so much if you're not going to be married.
Okay. So basically, what we're saying is you have no protection, either of you, if you decide to purchase a home together. You're not contemplating getting married anytime soon, or even if you are, if it's going to be a while before you do that, get a contract in place.
That's right.
Even in the short term, so that if something does happen, you can go back to that contract, and you can always update the contract. So let's say, after 5 years, things change and you want to update some of the terms of that contract. Of course, you can do that.
That's right.
But to not have anything basically will mean, in the end, if things don't work out and you want to try to recover any of the money that you've put into that home, you have to sue the other party to do that.
Yeah, that's right. And you may have to sue them anyway for what it's worth, but you would know the terms on which you're suing them, right? And that kind of thing can help inform an attorney. So if I bring my contract to the attorney and say, these were the things we agreed on, so I want to sell the house and I want these terms, that's a much easier case than, well, we made this contract 13 years ago, none of the elements are the same, but I still want to get out of the sale of the house and all these other things have happened. And or just, in evaluating whether I defend the case, right? So if someone comes to me and says, well, we had this contract, but I really don't want to do any of these things. I mean, I agreed to them, I just didn't, I no longer want to. Well, now I can advise you that you might not want to go to court, right? The terms are already
Here
laid out.
Here are the pros and cons of doing that.
Yeah.
So interesting. I caught something quickly that you said. So now I want to sell the house. Well, if you jointly own the house, you can't just sell without the agreement of the other.
Yes, that would be your area there. So you probably need both parties to sign a listing agreement.
Well, and that should be part of the contract up front, where that's one of the terms. If indeed things are not going to work out, we know it's not going to work out, how are we going to handle the house situation?
We're going to hire Tammy first off.
Well, yeah, of course. That makes total sense.
But also, and then this is how we're going to handle, making sure our documents are signed. We're going to follow whatever she requires. We're also going to split the fees in a particular way, right? Since you're going to have fees associated with that sale, you're going to want to talk about that.
Those are terms in the contract. Right. So thinking ahead, if the home has to be sold, and it doesn't necessarily have to. There are options, right? Where you don't have to sell. You could try to buy that person out, just like
you could refinance again. And all of the somewhat similar things would apply to some of the other things we talk about. Does the person who wants to stay in the home have the financial ability to get financed?
Right.
To to make that kind of equity payout? Like, are they going to be able to sustain the higher payment that might result, or will there be one, and can they sustain a higher payment if they're required to? All of those things would still apply.
Right, because if you're refinancing now and it's a 7% interest rate versus you locked in at 3%, it's a higher payment.
And there's an equity payment on top of that.
Exactly.
yeah.
So to wrap this up, because I don't think there's a whole lot more that we need to cover other than we thought it was really important to let you know and to be aware of and to really secure a contract. If you're moving in with a partner, buying a home together, that you have a contract in place that addresses the things like who's going to pay for what, how much did you pay, did you contribute to the down payment, the mortgage payments, who paid for the roof repair, et cetera, et cetera. And then terms like if you don't end up staying together, what's going to happen with the house? Those can be terms in a contract that are a lot easier to deal with on the back end with a contract in place than if there is not one in place.
Yeah, because if there's not one, you are headed to court. There's no way to stop it if somebody's going to stay in. And I think a lot of people, I think it's important for people to know that, because a lot of people who come into my practice with this issue, they don't understand that. Like, why would we be allowed to do this if there's no way out of it? I mean,
why would we be allowed?
For real,
because we're adults,
right? And honestly, that is the answer. You're allowed to make bad decisions.
Yeah, right.
You are absolutely allowed.
So it's not necessarily a bad decision that you want to buy a house with your partner,
right.
Someone you love at that point in time. It is a bad decision not to have a contract in place to deal with property ownership and what that means.
The central theme, so make decisions when you're getting along. Make those decisions when you're getting along.
So the moral of the story is make good decisions. All right. Thanks, Kristen.